Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. Donald Trump retreats. After thousands of arrests, months of clashes between federal agents and protesters, and the deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, immigration operations in Minneapolis are now coming to an end. That's according to border czar Tom Homan. But also tonight, as the administration chastises people who question their actions or accounts of those actions, there are 3 new instances showing that there's good reason to. First, in Chicago. You might remember border agents shot a woman multiple times, claiming she rammed them with her car. It turns out that wasn't true. Body camera footage proved otherwise, including one agent saying, quote, "Do something, bitch." That case was closed and the charges against her were dropped. Now, second, you'll remember this one as well. The feds claimed that an agent shot a man in Minneapolis last month after he was attacked with a shovel during an attempted arrest. Now, the incident even sparked Trump to threaten the Insurrection Act against Minneapolis, along with his officials and allies repeating the account chapter and verse.
What we saw was 3 individuals weaponize shovels and brooms and attack an ICE officer that had to defend himself.
2 other Venezuelan nationals ran out of a house and attacked him with brooms, handles, and shovels, which are deadly weapons. He had to discharge his weapon. 3 illegal aliens trying to kill an ICE agent in the street, and we're worried about interactions like this. This is outrageous.
Our agent is beat up, he's bruised, he's injured, he's getting treatment, and we're thankful that he made it out alive.
Well, it turns out apparently all of that wasn't true either. Tonight, court documents show the DOJ dropping the case against the man who was shot. While the details are vague on how their story fell apart, the government itself says that the evidence doesn't match the accounts of that incident. And third, you might remember, the administration jumped to call Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist, only to be refuted by the facts, and now today, their own Border Patrol.
This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts. We were being relayed information from on the ground from CBP agents and officers that were there. We were using the best information we had at the time.
Commissioner Scott and Acting Lyons, did you provide Secretary Noem with an assessment of what Mr. Preddy was engaged in and that he was engaged in domestic terrorism? Are you the ones that told her that?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Did someone in your staff tell her that?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
No,
So
sir.
why would Secretary Noem, why would she tell the public that this was an act of domestic terrorism?
I can't speculate on what someone else would say or why, sir.
Mr. Lyons?
Sir, I can't speculate to what the Secretary thought at that time, sir.
So it's no wonder why Homeland Security has lost credibility and Trump has lost the country on his crackdown. 60% say that he's gone too far on immigration, and only 38% approve of his immigration policies. That's down from 49% a year ago when he first came into office. That incident in Chicago where the woman was shot, I believe it was 5 times by Border Patrol agents at almost point blank range. Her lawyer made the point that had she not lived, had she not survived that attack, we might never have known what really transpired there because the account from DHS was so divergent from what the video very clearly shows, which is the agent swerving in to her.
I mean, I think what you're seeing right now is there are a lot of people who go into interactions with law enforcement from a legal perspective, and Judge Hatchett would know better than I, but it's more of a trust but verify type of ideal. Anything that they tell you, you're like, we love law enforcement, but let's pause. Let's actually see the video. Let's actually get witness statements. But in these cases, to your point, the majority of the time, the best witness is dead. So when you're dealing with officer-involved shootings, the best witness, the person who was actually targeted by law enforcement, has died. In this case, we're lucky enough to be able to identify and hear her statement. ICE has a fundamental problem. Kristi Noem is awful at her job. She needs to be impeached and or fired by Donald Trump. I mean, you see his ratings and the poll numbers dropping, sinking on immigration, but you also see immigration agents acting and running amok Over the past few years, you've had nearly 24 ICE and Border Patrol agents that have been arrested and convicted for charges ranging from physical violence all the way through sexual battery. And no one's saying anything about these ICE agents that are just patrolling our streets and committing everything from murder to everything else. We need immigration reform. We need immigration agents. But do we need ICE doing what they're doing now? The answer is hell no.
Joe?
Look, I mean, you phrased this as a retreat from Minnesota. I would say it's not a retreat. I would say it's a successful mission that is now over. I mean, there were 4,000 arrests of individuals. Many of them had ICE detainers. And I think they, more importantly, of the big picture, the policy, they reestablished that despite sanctuary city jurisdictions who refuse to comply with ICE detainers, they've reasserted themselves as saying, hey, whether you arrest someone and release them or not, we're still going to enforce federal immigration law in Minnesota, in Chicago, and where else.
And how do you say that's successful? How do you say that the mission in Minnesota and Chicago and places around this country...
4,000 people were arrested. I find that successful.
Do you find it successful that people who have no criminal records, who actually have been detained, who are actual citizens, because the U.S. Supreme Court has given them authority based on the color of your skin, which means my skin, your accent where you're working, to be detained? That is not successful, nor is it in compliance with what this country says.
With all
you
due
can
respect,
pick and choose
with all due
between...
We had a situation where Minnesota, like many sanctuary cities, refused to comply with the most simple solution to this problem. When someone is arrested, when they have an ICE detainer, they should not be released to the public. They should be handed over to ICE for deportation. That was the goal of this mission. The mission resulted in 4,000 people resulting in the arrest.
I haven't seen any evidence that...
No.
Well, the evidence that we don't need to wait for the detainer.
I haven't seen any evidence that what you just said has actually changed. And in fact, here's Mayor Jacob Fry talking about what he says came out of this operation.
I had two productive, if not three productive meetings with the border czar, Tom Homan. Obviously, there's progress in that they are leaving right now, but as far as some deal that was struck to get them out, the answer is no. I think what you saw is a federal government and an administration that thought that they were going to break the people of Minneapolis down. They thought that we were going to back down and sort of kowtow to whatever it is that they were looking to get done, not just locally in Minneapolis, but nationwide. They were looking to implement a national agenda based on coercing us to change local policy. And here's the thing, we didn't.
Well, what Mayor Fry is saying is that we don't want the people in Minnesota to kowtow to what the federal government is doing.
Well, what he said was literally,
they are enforcing the law.
What he said was literally, they were looking to implement a national agenda based on coercing us to change local policy, and we didn't. And I'm asking the question, what evidence is there that policy actually changed? Because as we've discussed at this table before, Minnesota is not universally non-compliant with ICE detainers. They do often transfer people from prison to ICE custody. In fact, some of the 4,000 people you're referencing, they were transferred directly from custody into the hands of ICE.
What I said before,
so that's the first thing.
What I said before was not that
the second thing is, if the issue is what's going on with Hennepin County, where is the evidence that the policy with the county jail has changed? I haven't seen any evidence.
I said the federal government is going to enforce those detainers and arrest the people they want to without the cooperation of Hennepin County.
You can't enforce a detainer.
Rather, you can enforce the arrest of the person you want to arrest.
Is supposed to be
correct. Yes.
Hold the person.
My point is,
right?
my point is,
you can't enforce that without
they're going to, if they have a lawful deportation order, they're going to enforce the law.
That has always been the case.
And more importantly, you're calling this, they shot a mother in the face and a nurse in the back, and you're calling that a success. So
no,
at best, this is a tap dancing performance for Donald Trump, or at worst, it is a gross lack of humanity for fellow human beings. It is disgusting, honestly, that I wonder sometimes when I see something happens, and I wonder, how could we possibly have a debate about this? How could there be another side to what we're seeing? You're bragging that they arrested 4,000 people. So what? If the goal is just numbers, then you can just do snatch and grabs at random. We don't know how many of those 4,000 people are guilty of anything. DHS hasn't even released data on that. That is a scary thing. They have terrorized this community. They cost local municipalities millions of dollars. Up to 20 to 40% of children were not going to school because they were so terrorized. So the alleged pro-life party that's so concerned about children, the alleged pro-law enforcement party that celebrates J6ers getting pardoned and ICE agents shooting moms in the face and nurses in the back, and you call that a success. It is a disrespect to the people out there watching. And I don't know anything about you. I've never been curious enough to Google, but I have to imagine you are a human being with family. You don't want somebody living like that. You don't want somebody being arrested or murdered by the state. And for all the people who have endured that for decades, it is a disgrace and disrespect
Tiffany,
to call that a success.
The immigration laws have not changed in the last 10 years, in the last 20 years.
How is it a success that they shot a nurse in the back and a mother in the face?
No one is saying, you're putting words in my mouth. Stop putting words in my mouth. I said the operation was a success.
I'm not going to say they didn't do anything wrong.
They reestablished the fact that immigration and customs enforcement can enforce immigration law. They reestablished that fact. That happened. It is unfortunate. It's a tragedy. There's an investigation going on with those shootings.
Look Alex Preddy's mother in the face and tell her that her son getting murdered by the state was a success.
No one is saying
look yourself in the mirror tonight and tell yourself it was a success.
When the hell did I say someone getting shot in a police operation?
At the beginning of the show. Let's run back to
Hold on. I think we can, I think she's raising an important question. How do you characterize an operation as a success if one of the byproducts of that operation is 2 American citizens were killed in the streets? I think a lot of Americans are asking that question. And it's one of the reasons why we're seeing that polling slide that we talked about early on. This used to be a strong issue for the president. It is not anymore, and it's largely because of what Americans are seeing in the streets.
Well, look, Tom Homan was set in to de-escalate, and obviously, in a not shocking turn of events, Minneapolis officials, Jacob Fry, are saying one thing about what's happening, and Tom Homan is saying that they do have some sort of retainer or detainer rather with these county jails. But I would say, as for the poll numbers, which you pointed to, I think a lot of that has to do with what the media chooses to focus on. And one thing that Tom Homan highlighted today is that in Minnesota, they have found 3,364 children that the Biden administration lost. And instead, 93% of the media coverage has been negative on ICE, according to the Media Research Center.
I know Tom Homan has been big on this lost children thing. But the idea that these children were lost or missing has never been true. Some of them were released into the custody of relatives or other caretakers, which is part of the process over many years.
They often were released to adults who weren't verified.
Listen, all I'm saying is that his characterization of them as being lost has never been accurate. And it wasn't accurate when he started saying it a year ago. It's still not accurate today. There are a lot of different reasons why those children were released into the custody of adults in the interior of the United States. That is not the same thing as those children being lost. But to your point on the depictions of what's happening, I don't know that you can blame the media, but even if you wanted to blame the media, what has also been happening is that Americans have been recording their interactions.
That's very important.
And that act has actually put regular people who are not immigrants in the crosshairs of this whole.
But let's be very clear about that. I mean, you brought up a point about children, and I think one of the things that people saw about children is children being displaced from their homes. We saw children being placed in different detention centers throughout the country. We saw children being sent to cities where they're not from with their parents, and a lot of people found that to be inhumane. I think you're right. I think much like the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when people are able to see brutality, their minds change, whether or not it's civil rights or whether or not it's immigration. Right. But I do want everybody around the table to be extremely honest. Now, it wasn't with Keith Porter in L.A. It wasn't with Renee Good when she was killed. But when a straight white male who's a CWP owner was killed and gunned down and shot 10 times, then the country moved. And I think that there is something to be said about that. Because it wasn't when these other bodies were gunned down, these other people were shot in the face, or the nurse on the way shot to work. But this is what happens, and this is what happens when things start to change. And we're starting to see that ice break around Donald Trump because people are saying, this can come to my doorstep. ICE is getting out of control.
Judge, you wanted the last word?
And I was going to say that also, historically, we've seen that happen.
Yes.
It is really when we get to that tipping point. And that's where we are in this nation now. We're at a tipping point. And it is hypocrisy. It is, you have to not be hypocritical about picking and choosing when you're going to be outraged.
Correct.
and that there has to be, if this democracy is going to survive, then we have to be very clear about the constitutional principles that are applied to people across the board. And that is not what we're seeing in this country right now.
All right, next for us, a judge blocks Pete Hegseth from punishing Mark Kelly over that illegal orders video. And a Republican senator is now warning Trump officials what goes around will come around in 3 years. Plus, it's perhaps the biggest political fight of the year. Should you have to show an ID and proof of citizenship to vote? We'll debate.